Broadcasting from the Any Hour Services podcast studios, I'm your host, Mike Wilson, and on this episode of In the House, we're going to be talking about heat cable. Let's go. In the House is a podcast about the major systems in the house: electrical, plumbing, heating, and air conditioning. Each week, I'm joined by a panel of experts. We pick a topic and we discuss it in depth. It's meant to be informative and hopefully bring you some value. Today in the studio, I've got back with me Gavin and Shane. They are managers over the electrical service department at Any Hour Services. And like I mentioned before, we're going to be talking about heat cable. Now, this time of year when it's snowing and it's cold, I think a lot more people are seeing icicles hanging off the roof, different things like that. But let's start by, just in case people don't know what heat cable is, what is heat cable?
Well, heat cable is it's got wires in it and it heats up so that it protects your roof from ice dams, icicles.
Okay.
Provides a path for water to get off your roof and into your downspouts, into where it needs to go.
Okay. What are some applications where people would actually need to install this?
Mostly in places that they've had issues, or that there's a potential issue. Like on the north side of the home, you don't get a lot of sun. So you get snow up top that melts from the heat from in the house. Mm-hmm. It comes down to the eave area and it freezes and then just causes problems.
Yeah. Shane?
I was just thinking, if for those of you in Florida and different places, maybe you've never even seen snow, so you might just want to turn this one off.
Yeah, just skip to the next episode. Don't worry about it. But I like to, at my house or at anybody's house, is I think a good place to do it would, if you've noticed over the winter, anywhere where you have icicles or if your gutters fill with ice, that's a good place to think about installing it, because Gavin, you mentioned ice dams. A lot of people, until I started looking into it and researching it years ago, I didn't realize what ice dams were. I think most people see icicles and they're like, oh, pretty, that's Christmas. I'm so lucky to have icicles hanging off of my roof and they look real, cool or whatever. But so let's back it up for a second and explain how those ice dams form and what's happening and why, icicles and ice dams are not necessarily a good thing. They might look good, but the damage that they could be causing to the house.
Okay. So an ice dam is basically where the waters come down and frozen, and it keeps freezing and creates kind of like a bowl. So the water will come back and go underneath your asphalt shingles. So
on your roof, it snows. And then if you can imagine, most homes have insulation in them, and attics, heat from the home is rising. So those areas at the top of the roof are usually the warmest areas. And so snow will start to melt off of those parts soonest. And as the snow melts, water's flowing down the roof. And then you get to a section of the roof where the overhang or the eave of the house, and there's not usually insulation up in there. And so you'll get the air is much colder, which makes the roof colder. So as the water's flowing down, it'll freeze, and then you still have water flowing down from above, and it'll flow over that ice, and it'll freeze. And if you can imagine layers building up, and then you mentioned it's like a bowl, eventually you end up with this little mini wall of ice, and you've got this area between the eave and the warm part of the roof where the water it's not frozen, and it's just kind of pooling up there. And where does water go at that point, Shane?
It can go anywhere it can.
Right.
So it's going to back up behind your shingles, and then it gets back into your house. So
what kind of damage have you guys been called out for and seen the kinds of damage that it can cause? Tell us about that.
We see here in Utah, we've got some cities that are higher, Park City, some of these ski resorts. That's where we see most of the damage. They can get up to 4, 6, 7, 8 feet of snow in some of these places. Mm-hmm. But I've seen some of these ice dams where we're back behind. It looks like a little pond back there. You've got 6 to 10 inches of water. Mm. If I can find ways in, it gets in the house. It'll ruin all your drywall. I've seen ceilings that have fallen in because the drywall gets so wet, it falls in, it goes down walls that you can't see, and it ends up in the basement somehow. So it can cause a lot of damage. I've seen estimates on just on roof damage of in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix the damage that's been done by some of these.
So, next time you see those icicles, it's cute, but you might not want to, keep them up there. So you mentioned, because I think when people think about heat cable, they think like, oh, well, it's going to melt all the ice. But you're not trying to melt all of the ice when you put heat cable up there. All you're trying to do is create a path so that you don't end up with those puddles of water, because ice on the roof, there's nothing wrong with that. It's when you end up with standing pools of water on the roof. And so talk to us, Gavin, about how you install this stuff to create those channels of, creating those paths for the water to go.
Okay. So on the roof, on your actual roof, we do what's called a sawtooth, which is just, it's 2 feet apart. You go up and down. It looks like a saw.
Yep.
That just provides that with the water up top comes down and hits that, it'll create a pathway for it to get down. We actually bring it off the roof so that it overhangs the gutter so that it can drip into the gutter.
Yep.
And then in the gutter, you have heat tape all the way down the gutter, down to the downspout, and then we take it a little bit further into the ground so that it's past that freezing point and gets where it needs to go.
Nice. So you mentioned that this heat cable is, it's got wires in it and it heats up, but can you tell us a little bit more specific about how this heat cable works as far as like how it's creating that heat or how it's doing what it's doing? Either one of you? I don't know.
So heat cable is creating heat with 2 different wires. And if you look inside your oven and you open it up, you have like looks like a big piece of metal in there, and it heats up really.
The heating element
heats up. But electricity is trying to get through this, but there's a lot of resistance created, so it creates a lot of heat. Heat cable is the same kind of thing. It's got 2 wires, and basically electricity wants to get in between them, and it creates heat that way. Very simple.
There's like a material like in between them that helps to it keeps them from shorting out, but it lets
does
that
let a
heat,
little bit of current through them, which creates heat.
Yeah. Okay. So are there different kinds of like heat cable, heat tape type of stuff? Like what are the different, as far as the technology and how this stuff works, what are the different things that are available?
So there's your constant heat cable, which you plug it in and it gives out the same heat every part of it.
Okay.
And then there's a self-regulating heat cable that I think it's foot by foot. I think it's foot by foot. It regulates to how cold it is there is how much heat it gives out.
So yeah, I mean, I guess you're melting this stuff with electricity. That can get expensive. I guess some of the cons of that constant heat stuff is that it comes on and it just is on full blast, and you have to control it by unplugging it and stuff. But then the self-regulating, you can turn it on and the temperature and different things control it. Go ahead, Shane.
So I was going to say on the stuff Gavin's talking about there, you can't just leave it plugged in all year round. It's still going to pull some electricity. So the stuff we use takes about 6 watts per foot. That's when it's the coldest. As it gets warmer, it'll take about 2 to 3 watts per foot, they tell us. So it's still taking power. So I mean, during the summer, you want to have a means of disconnecting it. The way it differentiates how much power it's given is actually a membrane in between these 2 wires. As it gets colder, this membrane kind of shrinks a little bit, tightens up a little, which lets more current pass through, so it takes more power. And as it warms up, it separates just a little bit, just expands, which gives that electricity a little further to travel before it's going from one side to the other, and it takes less wattage.
And there's different accessories that go with this stuff, right, to control it. And talk to me about what's available there.
So as far as availability on controlling heat tape, some people control it with just a basic switch. But before we get into the switch, one and very important thing on heat tape is what's protecting it. We have to have GFI protection, or around here we use something called EPD protection, equipment device protection. That protects, basically you're putting this wire on your house, on your roof. If something goes wrong with that and it starts giving power where it shouldn't, it actually turns it off. But as far as controlling a basic switch, there's temperature sensors, so they will turn on when it gets cold, and when it gets hotter, it'll turn back off. There's temperature moisture control sensors. That'll only let it turn on if it senses there's moisture there. So here sometimes we have a really dry cold. So we might not get snow for 2 weeks, but it's still 10 degrees. And now with that temperature moisture control sensor, it won't let that turn on until it senses there's something there to melt. So quite a few ways of controlling that.
Now, I've always viewed heat tape as not necessarily one of those DIY projects unless you've got like an awful lot of knowledge about how they work and maybe you've done it before, but I think they sell that constant stuff at the hardware store, and that makes it a little bit makes people think that there's less to it than there is. But even with that constant stuff, you have to make sure you're not crossing it and make sure you're installing it the way that it's supposed to. But if somebody's looking to get heat tape or heat cable or whatever you want to call it, what should they look for in someone that they're contracting this out to? Because I mean, you guys have been on jobs, what kinds of things have you seen people do that are just wrong installation, shortcuts, like different things like that? What have you seen out there?
A lot of things, just not installing it right. Like I was saying with the sawtooth, making sure it goes over the gutter. If you stop it too soon, it has a little area for it to just freeze. So it could be causing more problems. Just making sure that the person that's installing it knows what they're doing, knows how much that's going to pull.
I mean, I've seen people like just hammer a nail into the roof and wrap the cable around it to like keep it from coming down. Yep. That causes all kinds of problems. But so what should someone look for, or how do they tell that they're getting someone that knows what they're doing versus, because I mean, you've got roofers that would probably try and put it up, gutter companies that would try and put it up. I remember having a plumber come out to my house and like try and give me a bid, and I don't know his name, so I can't like put him on blast. I wouldn't anyway. But this dude literally told me, and I was testing him because I was just trying to see, what he would say. And he comes out there, and I could tell he was a plumber from the way, because plumbers will use heat tape and they'll wrap it around pipes to keep it from freezing, right? Yep. This dude wanted to wrap my gutter. Like, wow. Those that can't see, plumber. I'm making a motion as if the gutter is a pipe and he's wrapping around the outside. And I was like, oh, you really think that's the best way to do it? And he's like, yeah, I think so. And I was like, cool, give me a price. And I did not have him do it. But anyway, so that was interesting. So tell me, I keep getting distracted. How does someone know that they're getting someone that knows what they're doing?
Well, you can just ask questions, first of all. I mean, if you have somebody come out and they say that they should wrap your gutter, I don't know if that's the best way to do it. Heat tape, that's what it was first made for, was for heating pipes. And it has probably been the last 20, 30 years I've done more with the roofs. But before that, it was mainly pipes. Make sure they understand the electricity size of it. We can only run so many feet of heat tape on different sizes of electrical circuits. So you can you can string heat tape out forever, but then when you plug it in and it trips your breaker, make sure they understand the electricity side of it. There's also some pretty complicated, it depends what kind of heat tape you use, but the self-regulating, there's some pretty complicated connection points you have to make on those. The other stuff they talked about, the constant watt, you can go to Home Depot and buy that, and it's already got a plug and everything on it. It just goes up there. But as you're talking about this stuff, find out what you want. If you read a lot of this stuff from Home Depot, some of it even says you're supposed to take it off the roof every year because it's not meant up to be up there with the sunlight. That stuff too, if it crosses anywhere, it can actually cause a fire if it touches the self-regulating. It's fine if it touches. So ask questions about the quality of the heat tape. How long is this stuff going to last on your roof? Is it going to be 1 year and you have to replace it, or is it 10 years? But just ask a lot of questions. Somebody who knows what they're doing can answer all those. When you get to the electrical side, make sure they're licensed. Just because a plumber can put it up, doesn't mean that they should be hooking it into electricity. A lot of different laws and regulations when it comes to hooking into your electrical system.
Random question. I've always wondered, like I've been seeing more and more companies advertise that do like gutter covers that like, keep things from getting in the gutter and things like that. They only let the water through, which is the only thing that would freeze in your gutter and cause these ice dams. So like, how does the heat tape work with those things that are actually covering the gutter? Do you have to take them off and run it through? Can you not put it on with those? How's that work?
Usually just take it off and run it through.
And then put it back on.
Yeah, and then put it back on.
Okay. Yeah. So when you've got the loops hanging over the roof so that the water drips into the gutter, you don't have the loop connecting with the wire that's in the gutter, right? Okay.
A lot of times we'll run another heat cable on top of the gutter too, because as you think about water, it gets on top of that gutter guard. It can also freeze right there.
Gotcha.
Sometimes they'll say, well, just put it in the gutter and there'll be enough heat coming off there to melt it. But a lot of times it doesn't. So a lot of times at that point, your heat cable in the gutter, on top of the gutter, and then the little sawtooth zigzags that go down and connect on that. So the only goal in this whole thing is to get this water off your house. So you want to get it from your roof to your gutter, to your downspouts, and away from the house.
Does the self-regulating stuff that you put on, is it designed to be up all the time, all year round? Yep. What kind of life does it have on it? Or life expectancy?
So a lot of these, you can expect 10 to 15 years. We've seen some 20, 25 years it's been up there. So it lasts a lot longer.
Does it get less efficient towards the end of its life, or is it not really? As long as it's the integrity of the cable is still good and it's still insulated and not causing a hazard that way.
Should be just the same. Not like solar panels.
So over the life of it, then, at the end of that 20, however many years, is it just the wear and tear of being in the sun that starts to break it down? It just happens to last a lot longer than, other things that are rated to be in the sun or not rated to be in the sun?
So a lot of it is breakdown from the sun.
Gotcha.
You can also, a lot of people redo roofs quicker than that a lot of times. So sometimes they'll take the heat tape down and then put it back up. And if you nick heat tape anywhere, the more you play, if you're taking it off and putting it back up, it's not going to last as long.
So if someone has a bad roof and they're thinking about replacing the roof, do you recommend that they replace the roof first and then get the heat cable up? And if someone's heat cable is still working, but they're thinking about replacing their roof, do you suggest that they have a company come out and uninstall it and reinstall it for them, or do they just pull it down and put it back up? Can the roofing company do it for them? What do you suggest?
I suggest if you have a warranty with whoever put up your heat tape, you want to have them take it down, because you're probably going to avoid a warranty if you have somebody else do it.
Gotcha. What else do people need to know about this stuff? Anything?
It's great stuff. As you're looking at buying this stuff, talk to whoever's selling it to you and ask them what it's going to cost to run this stuff. Because if you've
not just cost to install it,
not cost to install it, but to actually run it on your house. If you've got a couple 100 feet and you're running 6 watts per foot, and that's on 24 hours a day,
1,200 watts.
So sometimes people are surprised by how much it costs at the end of the month when you get your power bill. So you got to figure out installation, and you also have to figure out what's your cost of running this stuff. So make sure that they can explain that to you so you're not surprised and upset when you get your first bill.
Got it. All right. Well, that's the show. I would ask Austin what he thought about it, but he told us beforehand. I got nothing to add about heat tape, so we're not even going to bring him in on this one.
Perfect.
Well, we'll be back next Tuesday with a new episode of In the House. If you've enjoyed watching or listening or however you're consuming the show, consider leaving us a review. Drop us a comment if you're watching it on YouTube or whatever. We appreciate your attention. If you'd like to know more about Any Hour Services, visit anyhourservices.com. Shane, Gavin, thanks for being here. I've been your host, Mike Wilson, and you've been listening to In the House.